The day the Kesher arrived was unlike any other in human history. It started with a ripple of excitement, quickly turning to widespread fear as the skies above Earth darkened with the shadows of alien ships. These were no ordinary vessels. They were massive, with sleek, sharp contours and dark metallic hulls that seemed to absorb light, making them appear almost alive. The Kesher, an advanced species that had traversed the stars for eons, sent a clear message to humanity. The time for Earth's isolation was over. Their ships, capable of annihilating entire worlds with a single strike, hovered ominously in orbit. Their leader, Xalzar, made a public announcement that spread like wildfire across the globe. He was calm, almost too calm, in his speech. "We are the Kesher, conquerors of the stars," he proclaimed. "Prepare to witness the power of the galaxy's mightiest race. Humanity will now know its place among the stars." Across Earth, people watched, some with awe, others with dread. Governments hurried to set up communication channels, military forces stood at the ready, and scientists scrambled to understand what kind of threat they were dealing with. It was clear that the Kesher had technology far beyond anything humans had ever seen. Their battleships were not only enormous, but seemed to hum with an unsettling energy. Every time they fired a test shot into space, the shockwave rattled satellites and reverberated across the planet's atmosphere. To many, it felt like the beginning of the end. Yet, despite the overwhelming show of power, there was an odd feeling in the air. Something about the Kesher felt off. It wasn't just their ships or their vast technology. It was the way they carried themselves. Xalzar, in particular, exuded an air of smug superiority. He didn't just want to impress humanity. He seemed to believe that the very idea of them being challenged was laughable. The aliens didn't even appear concerned. Their ships sat motionless in the sky, unhurried and unconcerned with the chaos below. People had expected the Kesher to demonstrate their power, perhaps with a show of force to instill fear. Instead, they simply waited, observing humanity from above with an unsettling calm. It was almost as if they were bored. For weeks, the world was on edge. Nations debated, strategized, and prepared for an attack that no one had the tools to stop. The Kesher's ships emitted a low hum, like the sound of a deep, distant thunder, reverberating throughout the globe. It didn't help that Xalzar had made his intentions clear. He had given Earth's leaders an ultimatum: submit to Kesher dominance or face the consequences. Their power was unmatched, and humanity would be foolish to resist. Yet, there was a strange undercurrent of doubt in the air. How could something so massive, so advanced, and so confident be so sure of its victory? A nagging thought began to creep into the minds of the world's leaders. Could the Kesher really be as invincible as they seemed? In every corner of the globe, discussions about the aliens' arrival began to shift. Citizens, many of whom had been filled with terror, began to ask themselves, what if these alien invaders had underestimated humanity? The more they thought about it, the more that one question loomed large. Could humans surprise them? Could they find a way to turn the tables, even just a little? The doubt in the Kesher's invincibility slowly began to spread. There was something in the way Xalzar spoke, in his overly confident demeanor, that made people wonder. Surely, if they were truly as powerful as they claimed, they wouldn't need to boast so much, would they? Xalzar had assumed that his demonstration of power would send humanity into immediate submission, that they would bow before the overwhelming might of the Kesher without hesitation. But something was stirring in the hearts of humans. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about pride. They weren't going to let an alien species decide their fate without at least seeing what they were capable of. The tension in the air was palpable. Governments prepared for the worst, but there was also a sense of something else, a quiet, simmering defiance. As the days stretched on, people began to wonder more and more about what the Kesher weren't telling them, about the hidden weakness they were too proud to reveal. Little did they know, the true test of humanity's spirit was about to begin, and the Kesher were about to learn just how wrong they had been. But that was still to come. For now, humanity stood on the edge, staring up at the vast expanse of alien ships that hovered above them like a dark, menacing cloud. And in the silence, the world waited, hoping, unsure, but ready for what was to come. As the HFY ships loomed in orbit, casting long shadows over Earth, the first wave of demonstrations began. The enormous alien battleships deployed fleets of smaller craft, drones that were sleek, fast, and designed for precise destruction. They glided gracefully through space, leaving a trail of sparks and shimmering light behind them. From every corner of the globe, humanity watched in stunned silence as these drones hovered over major cities, conducting mock operations and flashing their terrifying weaponry. Cities that had once seemed invincible, towering symbols of human progress, now felt small beneath the weight of the alien presence. But there was something about the way these ships moved, so assured, so calculated, that made the air tense with more than just fear. The HFY expected humanity to cower, to shrink back in terror at the sight of such overwhelming force. They anticipated an outpouring of panic, governments scrambling, military forces paralyzed by their inferiority. But what the HFY didn't account for was the heart of humanity itself. Across the world, the reaction was not one of fear, but of fascination. People watched not with dread, but with curiosity. What were these ships made of? How did they work? What kind of power did they harness? These questions swirled in the minds of scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens alike. Instead of terror, there was a building sense of pride. Humanity had faced challenges before, diseases, wars, natural disasters, and survived. This too could be overcome. In government halls, leaders began to prepare. The United Nations issued statements of unity and resolve, vowing to stand strong in the face of this alien presence. The military, which had been on edge, began to mobilize. But this time, it wasn't just about defense. It was about showing the world that humanity would not be easily subdued. Speeches were made, and even though the weight of the HFY's power hung over every word, the message was clear. Earth was ready to fight. Yet, the HFY remained unshaken. Zolzal, watching from the command center of his flagship, issued a challenge that rang out across the world like a cold wind. If your species is ready for the universe, show us your might. Defeat us in battle. It was a simple message, one that suggested a casual confidence, even arrogance. The HFY expected humanity to falter, to be overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the challenge. They thought that Earth's military would struggle, that the only resistance would be a few brave skirmishes before the inevitable crushing of human forces. They were prepared to watch as humanity crumbled under the weight of their might. But what the HFY didn't understand was the nature of humans themselves. There was no hesitation. The challenge was taken as an invitation, not to surrender, but to prove humanity's resilience. The military immediately began strategizing, not just for defense, but for an all-out counteroffensive. Top generals gathered in war rooms, plotting tactical strikes, while scientists worked feverishly to decode alien technology and find any weaknesses in their opponents' vessels. This was not a moment of desperation. It was the moment when human ingenuity and determination would shine through. In every country, people watched with anticipation. The alien ships may have been powerful, but humanity was not just a species of war machines and advanced technology. It was a species that had fought against the odds for centuries, overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable. The sight of their leaders standing firm, announcing that Earth would not back down, filled the streets with hope. They knew that victory wasn't certain, but they also knew that humanity was capable of more than the HFY could ever imagine. As the HFY ships continued to hover in space, waiting for a response, they were met with a growing tide of defiance. It was not a blind rage, but a calm, calculated response. Humans, for all their flaws, had one thing that HFY did not: an unyielding drive to survive and fight for what was theirs. The stage was set. The HFY had made the mistake of underestimating their adversaries. They had expected a quick victory. Instead, they had awoken something much more dangerous: the collective spirit of a species that would not back down. And as the countdown to the first battle began, humanity was ready to show the Keshar just what they had underestimated. The tension was unbearable. Across Earth, every person felt it, an electric charge in the air, a deep sense that something monumental was about to unfold. Would this be humanity's final stand, or would they find a way to turn the tide? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, the Keshar had made a grave mistake. They had thought humanity would bend to their will. Now, they were about to discover that the fight for Earth had only just begun. The moment the Keshar fired their first shots, the world held its breath. Their immense battleships unleashed a barrage of energy that lit up the sky like 100 suns exploding at once. The force of the attack sent shockwaves through the atmosphere, rattling buildings and shaking the ground beneath humanity's feet. But what the Keshar didn't expect was the resilience of Earth's defenses. The human space fleet, a mix of older vessels and newly developed ships, took the blows, absorbing them with remarkable efficiency. The Keshar had anticipated a quick surrender, but instead, they saw something they hadn't counted on: humanity's ability to endure and adapt. While the Keshar's ships were massive, imposing structures built for direct confrontation, they were also slow and cumbersome. Each ship, despite its overwhelming firepower, had limited maneuverability. They relied on their size and brute force to overwhelm opponents, a tactic that had worked for them in countless battles across the stars. But Earth's fleet was different. Unlike the aliens, humanity's ships were built for speed and agility. The new designs were sleek and compact, able to dodge incoming fire with remarkable precision. The older vessels, though not as advanced, were nimble in their own right, relying on decades of human ingenuity and modifications. The battle quickly turned into a dance of speed and strategy. While the Keshar ships tried to corner the humans, their size became a disadvantage. Human ships zipped through the battlefield, darting between the massive alien vessels, avoiding incoming fire with uncanny skill. The Keshar, for all their firepower, were unable to hit these smaller, faster targets. And as if that weren't enough, the humans weren't just defending, they were attacking. Earth's fleet began using hit-and-run tactics, launching surprise strikes against the alien ships, using their speed to hit vital areas before vanishing back into space. Each successful strike felt like a victory for humanity, a small but crucial step in the battle. The Keshar's superior firepower was still a terrifying threat. Every time they fired, entire swaths of space seemed to explode in light, and the shockwaves could knock human ships off course or damage their shields. But the humans didn't let fear stop them. Their ships were equipped with experimental technologies, laser shields that could regenerate faster than the Keshar's weapons could deplete them, quantum engines that allowed for unpredictable maneuvers, and even cloaking technology to vanish and reappear on the battlefield. The Keshar ships, in contrast, lacked the same level of adaptability. They were built for overwhelming firepower, not subtlety. They were formidable in direct combat, but when it came to evading attacks or responding to the guerrilla tactics that the humans employed, they began to falter. The human fleet, although outmatched in terms of sheer firepower, was outsmarting the aliens at every turn. The aliens, initially confident in their victory, started to feel an unsettling shift. The humans were not the pushovers they had assumed. Earth's fleet was starting to look more like a swarm of angry bees than a handful of defenseless ships. With every attack, the Keshar were forced to adjust, their commanders barking orders to tighten their formations and increase the firepower. But no matter how they adapted, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being outplayed. The once imposing fleet of Keshar ships, so sure of their superiority, was beginning to show cracks in their defenses. As the hours stretched on, the humans didn't back down. Instead, they adapted with every new strategy the Keshar tried. They knew they were outgunned, but they also knew they had something the aliens couldn't predict: their ability to innovate under pressure, to think on their feet, and to fight back against impossible odds. With every successful strike, every moment the human fleet dodged destruction, the morale of the Keshar fleet started to crack. What was supposed to be a simple battle of annihilation had become a fight for survival, a fight that humanity was determined to win. The battle was far from over, but it was clear that the HFY were beginning to doubt their assumptions. The humans had proven something they had never expected, but they weren't simply waiting for death. They were going to make the HFY work for every inch of space they claimed. The fight had just begun, and it was far from the easy victory the HFY had expected. After the unexpected turn of the battle, the HFY retreated to regroup, though they did so with growing concern. The human fleet, though smaller and less powerful, had outmaneuvered their massive ships with a skill and speed the HFY hadn't anticipated. Their confidence began to waver, and Azulzar, the HFY leader, ordered a full investigation into humanity's capabilities. The aliens had assumed that Earth's technology was outdated, primitive even, compared to their own. But now, with the humans' unexpected resilience and ability to fight back, the HFY needed answers. They sent their scouts to infiltrate Earth's communications and scan their fleets, but what they discovered only deepened the mystery. There was something the HFY hadn't seen yet, a hidden power, something far more advanced than they could have ever imagined. Still, Azulzar remained confident. He believed that, despite the setbacks, the might of the HFY could not be matched. He was convinced that once they made their move, Earth would be forced to surrender. He decided that the time had come for a direct invasion. The HFY, having tested humanity's defense in space, now moved to deploy their ships directly into Earth's atmosphere, a show of force meant to crush any remaining hope. Azulzar ordered the deployment of his largest warships to breach Earth's skies, fully expecting that the humans would cower beneath their shadow. But what the HFY didn't know, what they could never have anticipated, was that Earth had a hidden weapon of its own, one that had been developed in secret for years. Humanity, far from being technologically inferior, had been quietly advancing behind the scenes, pouring resources into building ships capable of standing up to the HFY's terrifying fleet. The world had not been prepared for war, but it had certainly been preparing for one. And now, as the HFY descended upon Earth, they were about to learn the truth. Without warning, Earth's military unveiled its Vanguard-class fleet, a new generation of warships that had been kept under wraps for years. These ships were unlike anything the HFY had ever seen. Sleek and fast, they gleamed with a dark, polished finish that reflected the sun's rays like silver daggers. The Vanguard-class ships were equipped with cutting-edge technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Their quantum weapons could tear through the toughest materials, their energy shields were nearly impenetrable, and their stealth technology allowed them to appear and vanish at will. What truly set these ships apart, however, was the energy source that powered them, a newly discovered form of energy so powerful that the HFY had no frame of reference for it. The humans had been working on this discovery in secret, and now, at the most critical moment, it was ready to be deployed. As the HFY ships moved into Earth's atmosphere, they were met with a sudden and unexpected force. The Vanguard-class ships emerged from Earth's hidden defenses, darting into position with blinding speed. The HFY had thought themselves prepared for anything, but they had never anticipated such a revelation. The first shot from the Vanguard-class ships sent a ripple through the HFY fleet, the quantum weapons slicing through the air with precision and power. The aliens, who had once seen themselves as the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, found themselves on the defensive. The HFY ships, though massive and formidable, were no match for the speed, maneuverability, and sheer firepower of the human fleet. Azulzar's face, usually so confident, twisted into a snarl of disbelief as he watched his ships take fire. His fleet, once invincible in their eyes, was struggling to match the speed and agility of humanity's new vessels. The HFY had underestimated humanity's potential, thinking they were still in the early stages of technological development. Now they were seeing the truth. Earth had been hiding its true strength all along. The Vanguard-class ships weren't just advanced, they were a game-changer. And as the HFY's ships began to retreat, Azulzar's once unshakable confidence began to falter. He had not anticipated that the humans would be able to develop such powerful technology, let alone keep it hidden until now. For the first time, the HFY felt fear. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, expecting to crush a primitive species beneath their might. Instead, they were met with a force they had no way of comprehending. As the Vanguard-class ships continued to strike, the HFY were forced to rethink their strategy, realizing that the battle they had expected to win easily was now turning against them. Humanity had revealed a hidden strength, and the HFY had no idea how to counter it. The fight for Earth had entered a new phase, one in which the balance of power had shifted dramatically. The HFY had underestimated humanity. This much was now clear. With the Vanguard-class fleet now fully deployed, Earth's forces were poised for their first major offensive. The HFY, stunned by the unexpected power and agility of these new ships, had to scramble to regroup. Their enormous, imposing vessels, once thought to be unbeatable, were now struggling to fend off a relentless barrage of human attacks. The Vanguard-class ships moved with terrifying speed, darting between the massive HFY warships, striking at their weak points before vanishing into the void of space again. The HFY's once impenetrable defenses were being torn apart in a series of precise, calculated strikes. The battle was fierce. The skies above Earth became a chaotic swirl of gunfire, explosions, and energy beams. Yet, despite the overwhelming firepower of the HFY, it was the humans' ingenuity that began to shift the tides of war. As the HFY's ships launched relentless attacks, humanity's fleet adapted. With each new challenge, human engineers and strategists found ways to outsmart their alien adversaries. One by one, they discovered weaknesses in the alien ships, finding chinks in their armor where a well-placed strike could cause catastrophic damage. Human ships, despite their size disadvantage, were agile and quick, using evasive maneuvers to avoid HFY fire while landing hits that sent the alien vessels into disarray. As Earth's fleet continued to press the attack, humanity's resourcefulness became evident. Scientists, working with military commanders, had been creating makeshift weapons and tactics for months. They designed new weapon systems in real time, drawing from Earth's vast pool of creativity and talent. Some ships, equipped with experimental pulse disruptors, fired bursts of energy that temporarily disabled the HFY's shield systems, leaving them vulnerable to follow-up strikes. Others used holographic decoys to confuse HFY targeting systems, allowing human ships to slip past their defenses unnoticed. The more the battle raged, the more it became clear. The HFY were facing an enemy they could not predict, one that bent and adapted with every move they made. Xolzar watched the battle unfold from the safety of his flagship, his face contorted with disbelief. How could this be? The humans, whom he had deemed primitive, were now breaking through his forces with terrifying precision. Their ships, though smaller and less powerful than his own, were proving to be far more effective. The HFY had always relied on their overwhelming numbers and superior technology to crush their enemies. But here, against humans, their advantages were slowly eroding. The smaller, faster ships were proving impossible to corner, while humanity's unexpected tactics kept giving them the upper hand. Xolzar could feel the shift in the air, the uncertainty creeping into his once unshakable confidence. He had believed the humans to be weak, unworthy of being considered a true threat. But now, as his fleet began to falter, the cracks in his belief started to show. Was this truly a primitive species? Or had the humans had proven far more resourceful than the HFY had ever imagined, and their relentless drive had left the alien fleet in disarray. Unable to fathom how such a small, seemingly insignificant species could outmaneuver them at every turn, Xolzar made a decision. He would call for a ceasefire. Xolzar's voice boomed across the communications network, demanding an immediate halt to all hostilities. "I request an audience with Earth's leaders," he declared, his tone both authoritative and tinged with curiosity. The HFY, proud and unaccustomed to being challenged, wanted to understand how humanity had managed to achieve such a remarkable feat of technology and combat prowess. It was an unprecedented move, one that spoke to the gravity of the situation and the deepening sense of uncertainty within the Keisha ranks. On Earth, the news of the ceasefire was met with cautious optimism. World leaders gathered for an emergency summit, knowing that the fate of their species could hinge on the meeting with the alien invaders. As the Keisha fleet pulled back and the first tentative signals of diplomacy were sent, the tension was palpable. Human negotiators, military leaders, and scientists prepared themselves for what could either be a turning point or a fatal mistake. The meeting itself was a tense affair. In a neutral space station orbiting Earth, representatives from both sides came face to face. Solzar, flanked by his top generals, gazed down at the humans, his eyes narrowed with a mixture of suspicion and respect. The human delegation, led by General Elena Vasquez and a group of top diplomats, stood firm, though they too were aware that the stakes had never been higher. Solzar wasted no time with pleasantries. He got straight to the point. "How have you done it?" he demanded. "Your technology, your ships, they are not of this world. We know the extent of your abilities. You should have been crushed long ago. What is the secret?" The humans exchanged glances before General Vasquez stepped forward. She met Solzar's gaze with unwavering confidence, but her voice was calm. "The truth, Solzar, is that our greatest asset is not in our ships or weapons. It's in our spirit." But Solzar raised an eyebrow, clearly not understanding. "Your spirit?" "Yes," General Vasquez continued, her voice steady but filled with pride. "Humans have been fighting for survival since the dawn of our species. We've faced countless challenges, wars, natural disasters, disease, and we've always adapted. We've rebuilt civilizations, explored the unknown, and fought for our place in the universe. Our strength doesn't come from our technology, but from our will to survive, adapt, and overcome. That is what sets us apart." The Keisha leader listened intently, the weight of her words beginning to settle in. He had spent his life thinking of strength as a matter of firepower and size. He had believed that the key to domination lay in overwhelming force, in the sheer might of a species capable of destroying entire planets. But now, faced with humanity's unexpected resilience and unyielding spirit, he was forced to reconsider everything he had thought he knew about power. But just as the meeting seemed to be swaying in humanity's favor, Solzar revealed a final deadly card. "You speak of spirit," he said with a cold smile, "but you underestimate us. The Keisha have one final weapon, one that will end this conflict in a heartbeat. An ancient weapon capable of annihilating an entire solar system. It was kept hidden for millennia, waiting for the right moment." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Humanity's leaders stared at him in disbelief, but Solzar's expression was unwavering. "We will use it if necessary. Your spirit may be strong, but it will be no match for the power of this weapon." For a moment, there was a chilling pause. The reality of what the Keisha possessed began to dawn on the humans. This weapon, whatever it was, could destroy everything they had fought for. It was a final threat, one that, if true, could end their fight for survival in an instant. But as the silence stretched on, General Vasquez refused to be intimidated. She looked Solzar dead in the eyes and spoke with a calm that sent a clear message to the Keisha leader. "You may have a weapon, Solzar, but you still underestimate humanity. We'll find a way to stop it, just as we always have." Solzar's gaze shifted, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. For the first time, he wondered if he had truly understood the true power of humanity. The threat of planetary destruction hung heavily over Earth. The Keisha had revealed their final weapon, an ancient and devastating tool of annihilation capable of erasing entire solar systems. With this new danger looming, humanity faced its most critical challenge yet. The ceasefire had given them a brief moment to regroup, but time was running out. Solzar and the Keisha were preparing to activate the weapon, confident that their overwhelming power would crush humanity once and for all. But the humans, as always, refused to bow down. In the quiet depths of Earth's military command centers, leaders and scientists worked around the clock, developing a plan that would defy the odds. It was a desperate gamble, one that had no guarantee of success, but humanity had always thrived on challenges. The plan hinged on using Earth's advanced ships, newly developed AI technologies, and humanity's greatest asset, its unrelenting tactical genius. The Vanguard-class ships, with their speed and stealth capabilities, would provide the spearhead, but it was the AI systems, designed to calculate and execute complex strategies in real time, that would give them the edge. The goal was clear: infiltrate the HFY's defenses, sabotage the weapon, and destroy it before it could be activated. The first wave of ships was launched under the cover of darkness, their engines silent as they glided through the void of space. The HFY had no idea what was coming. Earth's forces had learned the hard way not to engage in direct combat with the HFY fleet. Instead, they relied on precision strikes, stealth, and subterfuge. Their eye-guided systems mapped the location of the weapon, and a small fleet of ships moved toward it, avoiding detection by the HFY's scanning systems. As they neared the weapon, the AI began coordinating the strike, calculating the best approach to sabotage the weapon without alerting the HFY to their presence. Meanwhile, a second fleet, including several Vanguard-class ships, was preparing for a direct assault. Their mission was to create a distraction, drawing the HFY fleet away from the weapon long enough for the sabotage teams to succeed. The battle that ensued was a chaotic ballet of explosions, evasive maneuvers, and carefully timed attacks. Human ships darted in and out of the HFY fleet, striking at vulnerable points and drawing the attention of the aliens. The HFY, still reeling from their earlier defeats, found themselves once again outmatched by the speed and agility of humanity's ships. But this time, it was more than just the ships. It was the sheer unpredictability of humanity's tactics that left the HFY leaders scrambling. As the diversion unfolded, the sabotage teams reached the heart of the weapon's massive facility. Working quickly and with precision, they planted explosives and initiated a series of malfunctions in the weapon's systems. The HFY, who had once thought their weapon impervious, were blindsided. The humans' intelligence and resourcefulness had found a way to turn the tables. As the countdown to activation began, humanity's forces launched their final strike. The weapon, caught in a cascade of malfunctions, exploded in a burst of light and energy, sending shockwaves through the HFY fleet. The HFY, unable to process what had just occurred, scrambled to recover, but it was too late. The humans had destroyed their ultimate weapon, the last card that HFY had held. Without it, the alien forces were left vulnerable, their confidence shattered. Zalzar, watching from his flagship, realized that the tide had turned permanently. His fleet, once so powerful, now faced defeat at the hands of an enemy they had underestimated. The HFY were forced to retreat, their ships limping back into deep space, utterly humbled by the perseverance, ingenuity, and unity of humanity. As the dust settled, Axalzar and the HFY leaders had no choice but to face the truth. It wasn't the size of Earth's fleet, nor the advanced technology it wielded, that had defeated them. It was humanity's spirit. Their unyielding determination, their ability to adapt and innovate, had turned the course of the war. The HFY, once the proud conquerors of the stars, now acknowledged humanity's superiority, not in their firepower, but in their will to survive and their boundless creativity. As the HFY ships disappeared into the void, Zalzar offered a final, begrudging respect to humanity. Earth had earned its place among the stars, and though the HFY had failed in their conquest, they had learned an important lesson. Never again would they underestimate the power of a species whose strength lay not in its ships, but in its relentless drive to overcome.